An American citizen forced onto the Russian battlefield just for signing a government support form. He went to Moscow seeking refuge from political turmoil in the U.S., only to be caught in the recruitment machine of a country doing everything it can to avoid casualties among its native population. With just one signature in support of the authorities, he instantly became military property unprotected by international law or domestic media. No proper training and no way out. His family speaks out. Russian public opinion is outraged, and the rest of the world remains silent. This video will expose a two-layered propaganda campaign, from Western media narratives to Russia's censorship system. This is not an analysis. This is a warning. Less than 3 months after arriving in Russia, the American man, who once briefly served in the U.S. military, was suddenly issued a conscription notice by the local authorities. The reason he had signed a public petition supporting efforts to defend the territory, a political gesture that may seem symbolic elsewhere, but in Russia it equates to volunteering for state mechanisms. That decision swiftly turned him from a civilian immigrant into a military reserve under the Russian army as conflict continued escalating in the Donetsk and Kharkiv regions. His assignment to a unit just days after basic training raised serious questions about Russia's process of recruiting and deploying foreign soldiers. With no time to familiarize himself with equipment, no ability to coordinate in combat, and no language support network, individuals like him are easily pushed to the front lines, serving essentially as expendable forces. His family immediately took to global social media, accusing the authorities of using him as cannon fodder. However, instead of sympathy, they faced backlash from within Russia. The local public opinion insisted that choosing to remain in Russia and pledging loyalty to its government makes conscription a duty. The option to withdraw no longer exists, especially in wartime. International human rights groups had warned of this before. In early 2024, Human Rights Watch HRW and the International Oppression Foundation IOF both raised alarms over Russia's use of foreign contract soldiers as a buffer layer to reduce casualties among native Russian populations. They emphasize this not only violates wartime recruitment principles, but also reflects a deliberate strategy of life tiering, where human value is ranked by nationality. The case of the American man is not unique. In numerous recent reports, foreign fighters, particularly from the Middle East, Africa, Latin America, and the West, are being deployed to the most dangerous zones with poor equipment and virtually no legal protection. Russia's conditional volunteering system has created a subtle form of coercion where support for the government can instantly lead to military consequences. And when the man vanished from social media after receiving his draft notice, attention shifted to an African-American woman, another figure who had once praised life in Russia as her new peaceful home. But she too became the next example of disillusionment. Before leaving the U.S., she had worked as an independent media producer with years of collaboration with Russia Today RT, the Russian state-run television network targeting international audiences. In the shows she took part in, Russia was portrayed as a safe, stable place free from the chaos of Western media. In stark contrast to the U.S., which she described as divided by race, gender, and social unrest. But life in Russia quickly shattered the expectations she once shared. In January 2025, from St. Petersburg, she posted a short video on a decentralized platform claiming she had been attacked because of her skin color, 3 times in just a few months, with one incident happening near a police station. She stated that she had reported it but was completely ignored. No arrests were made. No media outlet covered the story, and no apology ever came from the local authorities. Since then, public opinion in Russia shifted. She, once celebrated by state-run media as a symbol of the world's growing respect for Russia, was immediately removed from official platforms. Some commentators called her a traitor, a pawn of the West, and a reverse propaganda tool. This phenomenon is not new. It's a recurring pattern in closed political environments where loyalty is defined by silence. When she spoke out, she didn't just dismantle the media-crafted image, she touched a forbidden nerve, exposing racial discrimination in a society that denies having any racial issues. The betrayal didn't come from the people. It came from the very system she once helped defend. The media that once lifted her up as proof of integration now uses silence to erase her own lived experience. Most Westerners living in Russia don't read Russian newspapers directly. They don't need to turn on state TV to receive information. Media doesn't arrive via loudspeakers. It seeps in through channels they already trust, especially mainstream Western publications. A recent feature in the New York Times, a major U.S. newspaper, became a prime example of this strategy. The article was written by a correspondent based in Moscow who had been granted permission to accompany Russian military units near the Kursk region. Access to Russian armed forces isn't granted freely. Every step is tightly controlled by the military and government. During wartime, no foreign journalist is allowed access to Russian front lines without state approval. And that approval always comes with conditioned censorship. The article portrays Russian civilians in war zones as innocent victims caught in chaos caused by Ukrainian counterattacks. It includes detailed scenes of damaged churches, panicked locals, and exhausted Russian soldiers. Yet nowhere does it mention that these areas had previously been used to launch artillery strikes into Ukrainian territory. There's no mention of Kursk's strategic military role, a base for missile launches, artillery fire, and drones since 2022. More critically, quotes from locals are presented verbatim without any analysis or challenge. Claims such as Ukrainian troops attacking civilians and ongoing genocide or NATO being the cause of all aggression are laid out as objective facts, even though they are clearly products of propaganda. In an environment where free speech is limited and citizens can face prosecution for straying from official narratives, all public statements must be scrutinized for not just their content, but also the context in which they're made. When an article about conflict deliberately avoids stating who started the war and who is defending themselves, the article loses moral credibility. In war, not every story has two equal sides. There are situations where the facts are so clear that any effort to blur the moral line becomes an act of complicity in violence. In early 2025, an independent press group from Europe arrived in the Kursk region, Western Russia, to verify information related to the Russia-Ukraine clashes, reported by international media. The trip was not part of any collaboration with the Russian Ministry of Defense, and the group did not accompany any military forces, ensuring maximum objectivity during the survey. According to initial observations, there was no clear evidence indicating that Ukrainian forces had directly attacked residential areas during the mentioned period. While some neighborhoods appeared abandoned, there was no sign of large-scale infrastructure damage, shelling traces, or mass evacuation. Drone images showed that the city still maintained basic administrative and logistical operations. Through conversations with residents on the outskirts of Kursk, some citizen accounts offered a perspective differing from official media reports. Several families stated they had received medical aid or evacuation assistance from forces not affiliated with the Russian government. There were also reports of accidental shelling causing injuries, though these incidents were not publicly reported due to reasons of information stability. The raw footage and first-hand accounts, untranslated and unedited, highlighted a significant gap between on-the-ground realities and censored news broadcasts. Is a common phenomenon in conflict zones, where information flow is often guided by the strategic interests of the involved parties. When journalism relies on official access, with permits, interpreters, and routes assigned by authorities, the independence of reporters becomes limited. This raises concerns about the objectivity of news from the front lines. In modern warfare, where information can become a weapon, cross-checking and multi-source access are essential for the public to gain a fuller picture. In modern conflicts, one of the common responses from Western media is the effort to maintain a neutral stance. This in principle stems from a journalistic desire to avoid bias and provide diverse perspectives. However, in certain cases, especially in wars of aggression like the Russia-Ukraine conflict, applying neutrality mechanically leads to serious moral consequences. Since 2022, Russia has initiated the war. launching an armed invasion, annexing territory, and carrying out large-scale military operations on Ukraine's sovereign land. Ukraine, under international law, is the defending side. Yet when Western media try to balance the blame, they unintentionally blur the line between aggressor and defender. In many articles, stories are structured symmetrically. Every accusation against Russia is paired with a controversial action from Ukraine, even if the scale and impact are entirely unequal. This creates the impression that both sides are at fault and that the war stems from irreconcilable disagreements rather than being a deliberate act of aggression. This is what many observers call false equivalence, a form of ethical distortion in journalism where the pursuit of neutralizing information ends up undermining justice. Instead of advancing truth, it dulls the public's ability to distinguish right from wrong. Media research institutions in Europe such as Deutsche Welle, Germany, Le Monde Diplomatique, France, and Politico Belgium have started speaking out. In recent reports, they warn that maintaining a neutral image at all costs is weakening international support for Ukraine. They also emphasize that in clearly aggressive conflicts, journalism's duty is not to stand in the middle, but to clarify the nature of the events. Notably, this trend doesn't stem from direct orders, but from internal self-regulation at major newsrooms driven by fears of being accused of losing objectivity, especially amid political polarization in the West. Some reporters have admitted that in editorial meetings, they are instructed to balance viewpoints, even when on-the-ground evidence clearly shows one side violating international law. And when the public is left in a moral gray zone where attacker and victim are evaluated, the information war has already achieved its first goal, the erosion of judgment. In war, not every article's neutral, and not everyone writing them is free. Before accepting a line of seemingly objective news, ask where does the writer live? Who controls their access? And are they truly independent? A journalist granted access to Russian troops in a war zone isn't just telling a story, they're replaying a pre-written script. The public has the right to access the truth, but that right comes with responsibility to vet sources, to support reports captured on the ground, and to reject so-called neutrality when it masks acts of aggression. This is no longer about two sides. Some wars have lines that are already too clear. And when truth is distorted, silence becomes a form of complicity. If you still believe journalism should speak the truth and readers deserve clarity, then now is the time to act. Subscribe, share, and stay tuned for the next report in this series.